The centerpiece was my grandmother's china, the kind she only brought out for Easter and Christmas. My mother had arranged everything perfectly. The cloth napkins folded into fans, the candles lit even though it was only 6:30 on a Thursday. The good silverware that usually lived in a felt-lined box in the hall closet. She'd even made my brother's favorite, pot roast with those little roasted potatoes he used to beg for when we were kids. I should have known then. My mother doesn't use that china for ordinary dinners. She uses it when she wants something. I drove 40 minutes from my apartment to get there. The whole way, I told myself I was being paranoid. My sister-in-law had texted me the week before, "Mom's been asking about you. I think she just misses you." And I'd taken that at face value because I wanted to. Because some part of me still wanted my family to just be my family. I parked in the driveway behind my brother's truck and sat there for a second. The lights in the dining room were already on. I could see my mother moving past the window. I took a breath and went inside. There she is. My dad was at the head of the table, already in his seat. He looked up and smiled the way he smiles in photographs, deliberate, held just a beat too long. We were starting to wonder. "Traffic on the 94, I said, which was true. But also I'd sat in my car for an extra 10 minutes outside my apartment doing nothing. I didn't mention that part. My brother was in the kitchen doorway. He gave me a hug that felt like the kind you give someone at a funeral present, but careful. His wife wasn't there. I noticed that, but didn't ask. My mother came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel and hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years, which wasn't quite true. It had been 4 months, which for us is long, but not years. Sit down, she said. Everything's almost ready." The pot roast was good. My mother is a good cook. That's never been the issue. We talked about small things for the first 20 minutes. The weather had finally turned. It was mid-October and the leaves were coming down fast. My dad mentioned something about the gutters needing to be cleaned. My brother talked about a project at work. I asked questions and listened and ate and thought, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is just dinner. Then my mother set down her fork. She doesn't do it dramatically. She just sets it down, very precisely, parallel to the edge of her plate, and folds her hands. I've seen her do it my whole life. It means she's about to say something she's been rehearsing. "We want to talk to you about something," she said. "As a family." My brother looked at his plate. My dad looked at my mother. I looked at all three of them and understood immediately that I was the only person at this table who hadn't known what this dinner was actually for. Let me back up. I'm 31. I work as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm in Minneapolis. I got there by grinding through a state school on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs, graduating with about $34,000 in student debt that I finished paying off 2 years ago. I did it alone. Not because my parents are poor, they're not, but because when I was 18, my dad sat me down and told me that the money they'd been putting aside was going to my brother instead, because he'd gotten into a private university and the gap was significant and family takes care of family. And I was capable, I'd figure it out. I figured it out. My brother got his tuition covered, a used car for graduation, and a down payment loan from my parents when he bought his first house interest-free, paid back slowly. Terms that shifted whenever money got tight for him. I watched all of that and kept my mouth shut because what was I going to do? They'd made their choice. He was their son too. I loved him. I still do, in the complicated way you love someone who has benefited from your loss without ever quite acknowledging it. I built my own life. I have a good apartment, a solid savings account, a 401k I contribute to aggressively because I learned early that no one is coming to catch me if I fall. I don't talk about money with my family because there is no version of that conversation that ends well. Or so I thought. About 3 weeks before that Thursday dinner, I'd gotten a text from my mother that seemed normal. "Would love to see you. Been too long. Can you come for dinner next week?" I'd said yes. Then the date moved. Then moved again. Then she landed on a Thursday, and it was firm. I didn't think anything of it. The week before, my sister-in-law sent her message. "Mom's been asking about you." The day before, my brother texted, "You coming tomorrow?" Just that. No, can't wait to see you, or it's been a while. Just a confirmation that I was still on schedule. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I wasn't. My mother's hands were still folded on the table. Your brother has been dealing with some financial difficulty, she said, and we've been trying to figure out how to help him. As a family. What kind of difficulty? I asked. I looked at my brother. He was still looking at his plate. The business didn't work out the way we'd hoped, my dad said. My brother had started a landscaping company about 18 months earlier. He talked about it constantly at Christmas, the plans, the equipment he'd already bought, the contracts he was sure were coming. I'd had some quiet concerns about the numbers he was throwing around, but I'd kept them to myself because he hadn't asked, and it wasn't my place. How bad? I asked. He owes about $47,000, my mother said, between the equipment loans and a line of credit he had to take out to cover payroll when things slowed down. $47,000. I kept my expression neutral. I've gotten good at that. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. I genuinely did. Watching a business fail is brutal. I don't wish that on anyone, and not on my brother. My dad reached under his chair, he pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table, and something in my chest went very still. We've been talking to the bank, my dad said. They'll restructure the debt into a single personal loan at a lower rate, $43,000. 5 years, the monthly payments would be manageable. He slid the folder across the table toward me. But he needs a co-signer, someone with a strong credit profile and stable income. I didn't touch the folder. They need you to co-sign, my mother said, just in case I hadn't understood. I looked at my brother. He finally looked up. His expression was something I'd never quite seen on his face before, ashamed, yes, but also something else. Something that looked like he'd already decided this was going to work out. I know it's a lot to ask, he said. Then why are you asking? I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected, not angry, just honest. Because you're family, my mother said, and family helps family. I finished it for her. I'd heard it so many times I could say it in my sleep. My dad nodded like I'd said something reasonable. I looked down at the folder. I didn't open it. I thought about the manila edge and what was inside it, my name on a dotted line, $43,000 of someone else's debt attached to my credit score, my financial future, my name. I thought about what happens when a cosigner is on the hook. I know exactly what happens. It's my job to know what happens. I need to understand something, I said. Did you plan this dinner specifically for this conversation? A pause. We wanted to talk to you in person, my mother said. This felt like the right setting. The good china, I said. My mother's expression flickered. The candles, I said. The pot roast, you made his favorite. I looked at my brother. She made your favorite. Because you were going to be upset if I said no, and she wanted you comfortable. Nobody said anything. How long have you been planning this? I asked. That's not, my dad started. How long? My mother straightened. A few weeks. We wanted to make sure we had all the information from the bank first. A few weeks. They'd been planning this for a few weeks while I'd been thinking I was coming to a family dinner. They'd researched the loan terms, prepared the paperwork, picked the date, set the table with the good china, and nobody had thought to say, hey, we want to ask you something significant. Can you prepare yourself? I'd like to look at the folder, I said. My dad pushed it closer. I opened it. $43,000. My name in a field that said cosigner. My brother's name in the field above it. Monthly payments of $812 for 60 months. And a clause, buried in paragraph 4, that I spotted immediately, that said in the event of default, the cosigner would be liable for the full remaining balance plus fees. Have you read this? I asked my brother. The whole thing? More or less, he said. Paragraph 4? He looked uncertain. If you stop paying, I said, for any reason, they come to me. Not as a backup, as the primary obliger. My credit takes the hit. My wages can be garnished. My accounts. I closed the folder. You understand that? He's not going to stop paying, my mother said. Mom, I looked at her. I work in finance. I have seen what happens to families when loans go sideways. It doesn't matter if you mean to pay it back. Life happens. We would never let that happen, my dad said. You can't promise that, I said. You can want it. You can intend it. But you cannot promise it because you are not the ones making the payments. The table got quiet in a specific way, the kind of quiet that means people are recalibrating. Then my mother said, "We thought you might feel this way. We asked Pastor Hendricks to come by tonight." And that's when I felt the specific cold clarity of understanding exactly what you're dealing with. "You invited the pastor," I said. "He's known this family for 20 years, my dad said. "We thought it might help to have someone neutral." "A pastor who has known our family for 20 years is not neutral," I said. "That's not what neutral means." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Pastor Hendricks is a tall man with a firm handshake and the kind of voice that sounds like it was designed to fill a room. He came in, accepted a cup of coffee from my mother, sat down at the table without being asked, and looked at me with an expression of practiced compassion. "I hear you're struggling with this decision," he said. "I'm not struggling," I said. "I've made my decision. Family is a sacred." "I'm going to stop you there," I said. "I have a lot of respect for what you do, but my credit score is not a spiritual matter. My financial liability is not something that belongs in this conversation." He blinked. "I'm not signing the loan," I said, speaking to the whole table now. "I want to be clear, and I want to say it once, so there's no confusion later. I am not going to co-sign a $43,000 loan. Not because I don't love my brother, not because I don't want him to get back on his feet, but because I have watched this family make financial decisions my entire life that I was expected to absorb the consequences of, and I am done absorbing consequences I didn't choose." My brother opened his mouth. "You got your college paid for," I said. "I didn't. You got a car. I worked nights at a hotel front desk for 2 years to pay for mine. You got a down payment loan when you bought your house. I saved for 4 years and bought mine alone. I have never once said that was unfair out loud to your face, because I didn't want to make you feel guilty for something that wasn't your fault. But I am saying it now, because you're sitting at this table expecting me to put my name on your debt, and I think you should understand what you're actually asking." The silence was different this time. My mother's eyes were wet. My dad's jaw was tight. My brother looked like he'd been slapped. "This isn't about the past," my mother said finally. "This is about right now." "It's always been about right now," I said. "Every time, every ask. It's always about the current crisis, and the history never counts." Pastor Hendricks had gone very quiet. He was looking at his coffee cup. "I think," I said, gathering my napkin and setting it on the table, "that I'm going to go." "You're leaving?" My mother's voice cracked. "We haven't." "We have," I said. "I think we've said what needed to be said." My brother didn't look up when I stood. My dad said my name once, in the tone he used when I was a teenager, and had said something he disapproved of. I stopped. I looked at him. "You're going to regret this," he said. "When you have a family of your own someday, you're going to understand." "Maybe," I said. "But I'll have made the decision that was right for me with the information I had. That's all any of us can do." I picked up my bag. I said goodbye to Pastor Hendricks, who nodded in a way that I think might have been respect. I hugged my mother, who stood stiff in my arms. I squeezed my brother's shoulder as I passed, because I meant what I said about loving him, even now. I walked out the front door and got into my car. Here's the part I haven't told yet. 3 weeks before that, dinner, the same week my mother first texted me about getting together, I had been sitting at my desk at work, going through some paperwork when my phone buzzed. It was a calendar notification I'd set 8 months earlier, when I first started thinking seriously about what I actually wanted my life to look like. The notification said, "Check flights, Iceland." I'd been thinking about Iceland for 2 years, not a vacation, something longer. A month, maybe 6 weeks. I'd always wanted to see it in winter, the northern lights, the way the dark closes in early and you have nothing to do but sit with yourself. I'd been saving a specific fund for it, separate from my emergency savings, separate from my retirement, just this one thing I wanted for myself. I opened the browser, I looked at flights, and then, almost without fully deciding to, I booked one. Round trip, departing November 14th, 5 weeks out. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding it, I just hadn't found the right moment, and it was mine. And I was still getting used to the feeling of doing something purely for myself without checking with anyone first. My mother texted me 2 days later asking about dinner. So when I sat down at that table with the good china and the pot roast and the manila folder, I already had a ticket to Reykjavik sitting in my email. Purchased. Non-refundable. Mine. They didn't know that. They thought they had me cornered, the good daughter, the stable one, the one with the solid credit score and the 401k. They thought this dinner was the whole story. It wasn't. The text started the next morning. My mother, I hope you slept on it. Call me when you're ready to talk. My brother, I really need this. I wouldn't ask if I had another option. My dad, which surprised me because he almost never texts. Your mother is very upset. This family deserves better from you. I read them all. I didn't respond to any of them. My sister-in-law called 2 days later. She was gentler than the rest. She's always been the one who actually listens. And she said she understood my position. She really did. But my brother was in a bad place, and if there was any way. I told her I was sorry he was struggling. I meant it. I told her I wasn't going to co-sign. I also meant it. I heard you mention the past, she said. At dinner? My mother-in-law told me what you said. I shouldn't have brought it up the way I did, I said. It wasn't the right moment. But it's true. I know it's true, she said. And her voice did something complicated. I know it is. That was the most honest conversation I'd had with anyone in my family in years. A week after the dinner, my aunt called. She's my mother's older sister. I've always liked her. She's sharp and funny. And she and my mother have a dynamic I've never fully understood. She said my mother had told her everything, and she just wanted to check on me. I appreciated that. You did the right thing, she said, which I hadn't expected. You think so? I've watched your parents make every financial decision for your brother his entire life, she said. And I watched them tell you at 18 to figure it out yourself. They can't have it both ways. I didn't know what to say. I said, thank you. You going anywhere for the holidays? She asked. Casual, like she just wanted to know. Actually, I said, yes, I'm going to Iceland. She laughed, really laughed, surprised and delighted. Good, she said. That's exactly right. The group chat started the week after that. My family has a group text that's supposed to be for logistics and holiday coordination. Somehow, it became the venue for a family-wide discussion about my decision. Cousins, I barely see weighed in. My dad's brother posted a Bible verse. Someone I still don't know who shared a screenshot of my LinkedIn profile in the chat, which I can only interpret as an attempt to demonstrate that I was, in fact, doing well financially, and could therefore afford the help. I muted the chat. I did not leave it, because leaving it would have caused a conversation I didn't want to have. But I muted it and let them talk and did not read any of it for 2 weeks. What I did instead, I contacted my HR department to make sure my work contact information was marked private and not shareable. I moved my emergency savings into a new account at a different bank. I called my own bank and confirmed that no one else had any access to or information about my accounts. And then I made an appointment with a financial advisor, not because I needed help, but because I wanted everything documented, organized, clearly mine. I also did some reading on cosigner liability laws in Minnesota, not because I'd changed my mind, because I wanted to understand exactly what I'd avoided. I landed in Reykjavik on a Tuesday afternoon in November. It was dark already at 4 o'clock, the sky going down like a curtain, and I stood outside the airport with my one checked bag and the cold hitting my face and thought, I am here. I chose this. The Northern Lights came on my 4th night. I was outside a small guest house about 40 minutes from the city, and I'd been told to watch for them, but I didn't quite believe they'd be real until they were green and white and moving like something alive, like the sky was breathing. I stood in the cold for almost an hour. My feet went numb. I didn't go inside. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the folder. I thought about my dad's face when he said I was going to regret it. Maybe I will regret some version of it someday. Maybe the distance will settle into something permanent that I didn't intend. I'm not naive enough to think that saying no to your family doesn't cost you something. But I thought about what it would have cost me to say yes. Not just the money, the liability, the exposure, the sleepless nights every time my brother was late on a payment. But the thing underneath the money, the confirmation that my needs, my future, my carefully built stability were less important than covering the consequences of choices I hadn't made. I wasn't willing to confirm that. My phone had some messages. I didn't read them out there under the lights. I would read them later, when I was back inside and warm, and I would decide carefully which ones deserved a response and what that response would be. I was done making decisions based on guilt and good china and pot roast and the feeling of being summoned. I was 31 years old. I had a good job and a clear head and a non-refundable ticket I'd bought for myself, and I was standing under the northern lights in Iceland while my family sat in a group chat deciding what was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. That was the thing I kept coming back to over and over, standing there in the cold with the sky moving above me. For a very long time, I'd operated as though my success was something I owed them, like, by building a stable life, I'd created a debt to the people who'd told me to figure it out myself. Like doing well meant I had to absorb the cost of everyone else's choices until the scales felt even. The scales were never going to feel even. There's no amount of co-signing that makes up for being told at 18 that your education mattered less. There's no dinner that makes that conversation not have happened. I went back inside and ordered a bowl of lamb soup and sat by the window and watched the lights until they faded. My phone buzzed twice. I turned it face down on the table. I'd read it later. Right now, I had soup and a window and a sky that had no opinion about my credit score. That felt like enough. I've been back home for 6 weeks now. Things are different in the specific way that happens when something gets said out loud that was always quietly understood before. My brother and I have talked once, a short call. Careful on both sides. Nothing resolved, but nothing broken either. My mother and I have exchanged some texts that are functional and polite. My dad hasn't reached out directly, which is its own kind of answer. My aunt and I have talked 3 times. She's become the person in my family I trust most, which is a strange and somewhat late discovery. My brother ended up getting a smaller personal loan with a higher interest rate without a cosigner. It's harder terms, but they're his terms. I hope he pays it off. I hope he gets back on his feet and that the landscaping business either recovers or he finds something else that works. I genuinely want that for him. I didn't put my name on his debt. I think about that sometimes when I check my accounts, when the numbers are where I put them and they belong to me and no one else's crisis can touch them without my consent. It's a quiet thing. Financial security. It doesn't make noise, but it's solid underfoot in a way that I didn't fully appreciate until I understood what it would feel like to have it at risk. I have a photo on my phone from Iceland. The northern lights out of focus a little because my hands were cold and I was shaking slightly from the temperature. Green smearing across a dark sky, one bright streak in the middle like something trying to be said. I look at it sometimes when things feel complicated. I chose that. I'm allowed to choose things. That's what I went to Iceland to remember, and what I carried back home with me, and what I intend to keep. There's a photo on my phone I keep coming back to. The northern lights, slightly blurred because my hands were shaking from the cold. Green and white across a black sky. I took it alone, standing outside a guest house in Iceland, 40 minutes from Reykjavik, while my family was somewhere back home in a group chat deciding what was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. That's what I finally understood out there. For most of my adult life, I'd operated under this quiet, unexamined belief that my stability was somehow a debt I owed to the people who'd told me at 18 to figure it out myself. Like succeeding meant I was now responsible for absorbing everyone else's consequences. Like doing well was the thing that made me the one who had to say yes. I carried that belief for a long time without ever naming it or questioning it. And that's the part I think about most now. Not the dinner, not the folder, not the pastor sitting at my mother's table with his coffee and his practiced compassion. The part I think about is how long I let that unexamined belief run my life. What the dinner clarified for me is something I think I already knew but needed to see plainly. Actions compound. Every time I stayed quiet about the unfairness, every time I absorbed a cost without saying so, I was teaching the people around me that I would continue to absorb costs without saying so. Not because they were malicious. I don't actually think my parents are malicious, but because I never showed them a different version of me. The outcome at that table was the direct result of years of me choosing accommodation over honesty. I'm not saying that to punish myself. I'm saying it because understanding it is the only way to do something different. What I had to draw on that night, what actually got me through it, wasn't anger. It was clarity. I'd spent years building genuine knowledge of how money works, how liability works, what a cosigner clause actually means, buried in paragraph 4. That knowledge wasn't incidental. It was the thing that let me read that folder and speak plainly and not be talked out of what I understood to be true. You cannot manipulate someone who fully understands what they're being asked to sign. I think about that a lot. Understanding the real terms of a situation, any situation, is one of the most protective things a person can develop. And then there's the thing underneath all of it, the decision to keep going when it's hard. I paid off $34,000 alone. I worked nights at a hotel front desk. I built a savings account and a retirement fund and an apartment that was mine, by myself, without a cosigner, without a family loan, without anyone catching me. That didn't happen because it was easy. It happened because I decided every year, sometimes every month, sometimes just every day, that I was going to keep going. That kind of persistence is quiet. It doesn't look like much from the outside, but it's what you have left when the good china is put away and the candles are blown out and everyone has gone home. My aunt called me good. My sister-in-law said she knew I was right. The Northern Lights didn't have an opinion either way, but they were extraordinary. I chose that flight for myself. I'm still learning at 31 that I'm allowed to do that, to choose things for myself, without checking, without apologizing, without waiting to see if the family approves. That's what I carried home from Iceland. That's what I intend to keep.